Today I would like to show you how we can transform a scene like this, which is a basic shot at a lake in Slovenia, Lake Bled in this case, but this photo can be shot in many different places all around Europe where there are lakes, because you will find similar boats to this one and similar trees and landscapes to this particular shot. So it's a very easy shot to take, but I would like to show you how we can transform this image into a soft glow, a dreamy landscape, which looks much better than the current photo that we have in front of us. So let's quickly take a look at how we can do this, and we'll be starting off with some basic adjustments as always. So immediately I can see that the light is coming from the left side of the image and it's practically behind my trees. So you can see that the leaves are illuminated from the back. You can also see that the canopy on the platina boats are illuminated from the back as well, and also the trees in the background show that the light is coming from the left side. So what we will be trying to do is emphasize that light coming from the back to create this dreamy scene. So we will need some softness in the light coming through, and we will also need to adjust the highlights and shadows of the image in order to create a more dramatic scene. So immediately I'm going to crop the image to create a better looking composition. I would like to keep the platina boat right here at the rule of thirds. So I'm going to press enter. I can see that it needs some straightening as well, so just a bit. And now I can start playing around with the basic adjustments. I will immediately decrease the highlights just slightly. You can see that when I decrease the highlights, a few clouds show up in the sky right here. The sky is slightly overexposed, but for the purpose of this particular image and this particular edit, overexposure is not an issue at all, because we will need to create even more light coming in from the left side behind the trees and create a soft glow. And this will not interfere with our plans at all. So we can also reduce the blacks just slightly to create a bit more contrast, and we can also increase shadows so we get a bit more texture, a bit more detail in the shadow areas. In order to create this dreamy and glowy effect, I'm going to increase texture by just a bit, not too much. Obviously we'll create a more crispy looking texture in the image, but then I'm going to compensate that by reducing clarity, which gives a sort of soft glow around all our edges, and also bringing down the haze just slightly, which softens out the overall image. One thing I would like to do is increase vibrance just slightly, because obviously we have a lot of green, a lot of color in the platina boats right here. So I would like to make sure that the color is retained in all of my image. Some local adjustments. So I'm going to immediately start by creating a linear gradient at the very bottom right here. And I would like to make sure that there's no texture, no detail in this particular foreground area, because I want the viewer's eyes to immediately go towards the scene where there are these trees on the left side and the platina boats on the right side. So I'm going to reduce the haze just slightly, reduce texture and clarity by a bit as well, and you can see that the details have faded out right here. I'm going to reduce exposure as well, and this will create a sort of vignette effect, and reduce highlights and whites by just a bit, maybe compensate by introducing a bit more exposure again, and reduce the blacks just slightly. We can create yet another mask. I'm going to use a radial gradient up here, and I'm going to move it to sort of behind the trees. We can intersect this mask with the sky, and as you can see, the trees have been removed from my selection. So now I only have a sky and a radial gradient sort of as a selection for this particular area. I'm going to enlarge this radial gradient just slightly, but I would like to feather it out a bit more. So I'm going to decrease the actual selection area and feather it a bit more right here. And this part will be exactly the part where we introduce a bit more light and a bit more softness in the surrounding areas from where the light is coming through. So I'm going to decrease the haze, and as I said, right now the clouds are practically being faded out once again, even though we reintroduced them by reducing highlights in the previous steps. And I want to increase exposure just slightly and increase the blacks, which, as you can see if you look at this particular area right here, will soften the surrounding areas. There's not much effect happening right now, but we will be increasing temperature in order to make it look like yellowish light, proper sunlight. And we can also play around with the amount slider. You can see that where the light is hitting the branches of the tree, there's a bit of a glow happening behind. If we reduce the amount slider completely, you can see this effect in action. And even right here, where we feather out our selection, you can see the glow happening as I increase the slider. Alright, so this should do it. I'm going to now target a bit of my trees to make sure that I have the right contrast and the right amount of light happening. And in order to do this, I'm going to create a luminance range. I'm going to select the bright part of the tree right here, and I'm going to adjust this luminance range in order to select only the brighter parts of the trees. Right there should do it. And now we can play around with the exposure of the highlights. As you can see, we can brighten them as much as we like. No need to overdo this particular selection, because over brightening will obviously create a bit of a fake look. So I'm going to also increase temperature, and as you can see, the leaves in the trees are looking really dreamy now. We can also increase tint just slightly to introduce a bit of a red tint right here, not too much. And now I will move over to creating yet another luminance range, and this time I will be doing it for the shadow parts. So we can adjust the selection. You can see I've selected the shadow areas only. We can decrease the blacks and the exposure just slightly, but we will need to keep in mind that we have to keep a warm look to these particular areas. So I'm going to increase temperature just slightly and maybe increase the tint once again to balance out the color that we've introduced in the highlight areas. Another radial gradient, I'm going to target the Platinum right now, make a rough selection there, and we can increase exposure just slightly. I would like to move the viewer's attention towards the Platinum as much as possible, because obviously these are the center of attention, and I would like that they pop out of the image as much as possible. And in order to do this, I'm going to increase saturation just slightly. I've already increased the exposure, and maybe increase the contrast, which gives it a bit of a more punchy look. You can see that we have emphasized the light on this particular area. A few final steps. I'm going to create another radial gradient, a large one this time. I'm going to cover most of my image, but I'm going to leave out this left bottom corner, this right bottom corner, and a bit of the right side as well. But I will invert this particular mask. As you can see now, I've selected only the parts that I had left out before. And I would like to decrease exposure, maybe adjust the actual selection slightly, and decrease the blacks as well. And this will give the image a sort of vignette look without obviously compromising the rest of the image. We already have a bit of a vignetting happening right here at the left side, and we obviously don't want to touch the sky, and we obviously don't want to touch the sky where the glow is happening, but we can also target the sky at the very end of the right corner, and we will be doing that by creating a linear gradient from the very right corner. I'm going to intersect this with the sky to remove the selection of the trees right here, and I'm going to decrease exposure just slightly, decrease the highlights, and we can also decrease the temperature. We can move this selection a bit further, maybe decrease the highlights a bit more, and maybe we can go back to this glow selection and reduce the amount just slightly. And right there it looks much better. One final thing to do is to play around with the color mixer, because I think that some colors need a bit of adjustment. So I will immediately go over to the yellows in my image. You can see that the leaves in the left side of the image are yellowish. We can make sure that the color is the yellow that we're looking for. We can increase saturation as well, which gives it a bit more punch. Then we can move over to the greens and make sure we have the right tint of greens. And if I move the hue slider towards the green rather than the yellow side, you can see that the color is intensified and looks much better than what we started with in terms of color. And we can also target the reds and magentas which are present in the Platinum boat right here, and also in this tree in the background. We can intensify the color. You can see that the color intensified by a bit right here, and we can also move it towards the magenta to intensify it a bit more. One thing I could do now is go to Photoshop and remove the distractions that I have in the image in order to make it look more pleasant and a cleaner looking image. And once I'm in Photoshop, I will immediately duplicate my layer. I will use the lasso selection tool and I will select my distractions which I would like to remove, use generative fill and wait for the outcome. Right there, the people have been removed successfully. Remove some cars right here. Let's go with this selection for now. And this car in this particular area. Excellent. I'm going to save the image back to Lightroom, wait for the image to make its way back to Lightroom, and there we have it. We have the image cleaned up of the stuff that we had before, and now I'm going to once again move my crop just slightly because I think it can look better. So after that final crop, let's compare the before and after, and right here you can see that this generic shot of a lake in Slovenia has been transformed into this dreamy and soft glow scene, which obviously looks much better than what we started with. I really hope that you find places like this one to shoot photos similar to this, and that you can use this particular tutorial to edit your photos in this particular way. Thank you for watching as always, and please make sure to like and subscribe.